today we can take a closer look at the German media system, starting with our first overarching question: how is news made in Germany? Especially in German public broadcasting. To get to the bottom of this question, I'm very happy that we have two very exciting keynote speakers with us. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mrs. Andrea Roth, journalist at Bavaria's Public Broadcasting Service and deputy member of the board of the European Federation of Journalists, as well as Mr. Sammy Khamis, the reporter at Recherche, the investigative research team of Bavaria's Public Broadcasting Service. So welcome, Mrs. Roth, welcome, Mr. Khamis, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kronenberger, for this nice introduction. And as it's my first day here today, hello to everybody. I'm very excited to see and to hear from you. As you heard, I'm working for public broadcast, and before we decided, before we come to the question how news is made and how research is made, that we split the keynote into pieces, and I will give you a kind of introduction in the public broadcast in Germany about independency, quality obligations, and so on, because this is very important to the how news is made. And my colleague Sammy Khamis later, he will give you more of a practical aspect because he's working for the research unit in our house, and he will tell you about how news is made. So let me first give you an insight into the public broadcast sector in Germany. And please, if you know it already well, just give me a sign. I can also rush through, but maybe it's quite interesting to know. So I'm working as a journalist. I'm a part from the Bavarian television. We have 9 regional radio and TV stations which belong to the great ARD network. That's the first program in Germany, and we also have a second program in Germany with ZDF, and these two are the public broadcast services in Germany. Statistics show that we almost reach the entire population in Germany. In average, every second person turns on ARD television or radio waves every working day, and our website, just to give you a kind of overview, register around 307 million visits per month online. We also reach younger people which use our programs, namely 84% of those aged 14 years and over it, so also the youngsters. But what defines public broadcasting in Germany now? First, it's the joint financing and its independency. So the financing is made by the citizens, by the taxes, and that guarantees reliable reporting that independent of political and economic interests, which is not the case in many countries, as I know, working for the European Journalist Federation. So it's very, very seldom. So for the equivalent of 41 cents a day per household, you get this public broadcast. And on the administrative boards of the ARD, the first program, there are representatives from different social groups. If it's church, is it scientific parts of a society who control us broadcasters, whether program or structure. Our independency from the government is guaranteed by law in Article 5 of the Constitution. So the freedom of broadcasting and the obligation to serve the society is also a valuable asset within our statutory program mandate. So this is kind of the legal basis. So how we also protect our daily reporting from other influences, from parties, right wing, left wing, from companies, unresearched informations. So we'll come to that later with Sammy, my colleague. In any case, the ARD and its 9 regional broadcast channels have a target to keep the citizens informed and enable them to form their opinion on their own, as well as enable them to participate in the social discourse. That's a big target. So it's not only just to inform, we should enable the citizens to do something. I will come to that later. That means for our work, considering a very responsible handling of topics and trustworthy content information. So this is kind of the basis for our work, and I might say sounds quite pretty well, no? But of course you have to ask yourself, who guarantees for the quality in the program and in the daily work? When in my company, only in the Bavarian television, you have around 7,000 people working there. Everybody maybe with own interests, with own, sometimes belonging to a party, sometimes working also for a company, you never know. So how can we guarantee this in the daily work? So first of all, we at the Bavarian television and also in other TV stations, we have quality officers for day-to-day business. For example, who check whether the reporting is balanced or whether the wording is correct in terms of gender, balancing, presenting always both sides of a story, which is very important. Then there are also new structures who enable the quality of a program. We build up a quality managing unity. It's since 10 years now. That means all editorial offices must regularly go through a quality process in which the quality of their projects and program is checked on the basis of a previously designed quality profile. The quality management group also serves with program analysis or helps when we develop new formats. For example, we ask them, can you help us? Can you support us with your experience, with ideas, and so on? So, and also there's kind of fact-checking unity. And if mistakes are found in reporting or in the news, we have to, we have to handle that very transparently. We have to inform the public. We have to, it's law. We cannot just say, oh, maybe they didn't notice or oopsie, problem. Really, we have to say, we have to write it down online in the newspaper, we made a mistake. The counts are not right. We correct that in this and that way. So that's a big thing. But before we move to this concrete part, also with Samis, I would like to focus shortly on the developments which are what we are currently really struggling with, and it's a big problem also for a public service media. So even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the public media in Germany was under attack. The arguments are the program would be too expensive, they would investing too much in entertainment and into sports. The opinion was widespread in the public that service media should focus on their core tasks, such as information, education, and culture, and leave the rest to the private media. You can imagine who spread these messages. So we have also very widespread private media sector in Germany. But also the population, many also prefer to pay subscriptions to Netflix or Amazon Prime, which is the case in many countries. So it's a development we cannot just ignore. And they don't want to pay the public license fee for a public broadcast. They say, oh, I spend it directly to my program. Netflix is super. I don't need any news. I don't need your entertainment and so on. And we have a problem with the parties. They join the way of criticism, and for example, the Free Democratic Party, FDP, is calling us to be streamlined. The right-wing party, AfD, even for us to be abolished, because their interest is to build up a government-controlled TV, where they have a kind of Sprachrohr, I don't know the English word, they can spread out their opinions directly. So besides, just to tell you, as a part also of a European Journalist Federation, the critics and the anger against public broadcast is not only a problem in Germany. I can frankly say that with the growth of populist movements in Europe, this anger has now found political representation, whether in the Netherlands, where the politically opportune programs are being agitated, or in France, where right-wing Marine Le Pen accuses the public broadcast of distorting the truth. Also, conservative parties want to downsize the program, like in England, the BBC, which is currently the case. In Serbia, Poland, Hungary, you maybe can add later, the public broadcast is grappling with a completely different issue because they struggle with independent reporting. Politics and government have a massive influence on broadcasting there, and I would be curious to hear from you later on what problems you have. In other countries, the increasingly poor funding is causing public broadcast to falter. For example, in Denmark, Spain, Portugal, Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Hungary. And also now more and more in Germany. We just lack more and more the financial basis. This is, for example, in Germany now we have to raise the broadcasting fees. They are paid by the taxpayers, and after 15 years of not raising it, they should increase now to €18.36. That means 86 cents more monthly. But you cannot imagine how big the problem is to get these around 80 cents more per month. The critics have become even louder, and there's a risk that the fees cannot be increased. So that would force the broadcasters to save massively and to put our program and thus also the quality totally at risk. So that's really a big problem. So think of the COVID-19 crisis and how much we need information and quality in the background stories to it. So statistics show that our, for example, 8 p.m. program, Tagesschau and Heute Journal, as well as other formats, have been in the top positions of the daily quota charts for weeks since the COVID-19 situation. So in addition, we have totally, must say, dream audience ratings in this time. For example, our online news Tagesschau has tripled its usage figures to around 9 million visits. So that's a count. So what ARD and ZDF are doing in these times is actually public service in the best possible sense. So we created new programs, a daily Corona podcast where we interview medicine people, ask questions, or a special offer for learning at home under the motto School at Home, because many schools were closed. Some schools are beginning to close again, so they want to close the gaps. And also public broadcast in Berlin, for example, wants to close the gap in social life and broadcast programs from museums or sporting events during lockdowns. So, but a second development also challenged us very much. It's trustful information. So now we come to the point. We find thousands of different expert and medical opinions. We find different numbers and certainly very different assessments of a pandemic and opinions about what is the best to be done, if from experts or also from other sources. Just think of the social media. So this problem does not stop at public broadcasters either. Our 9 broadcasters at the ARD decided on a Leipzig impulse to work even more together with all our network, private broadcasters, building up an early warning system. So we were also required to be very transparent in what we report on the government's plans to deal with the crisis, on what things we critically question, also regarding governmental advices. So we have to be also critical. So the government tries to give trustful advices. We know that, but we are a public broadcast. We should be independent. So it's very hard to come to a decision sometimes to what to publish. So this main need for transparency is when dealing with insecure data and inconsistent facts. So we were and are required to disclose our decision about which data to use more clearly than before. So far, it has been and is not easy to decide. So just consider the opinions of the medical professionals. They're all professionals. So which assessment could be the right one? We don't know. What information do we give to our audience and what opinions do we pass on? This is a big challenge. And this is also a good point to come to my colleague Sammy Khamis, because he works exactly where such decisions about data are made, and he works for our research unit. How this works, how he's finding new subjects, and how he's checking information and facts, he will tell you now. So thank you very much for listening. It was glad to talk to you.
Thank you very much for your words.
Thanks. This was really the perfect rundown of me basically picking up from where Andrea started. So hi, my name is Sammy. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but until then, so now you've seen me and you've seen who speaks. So I work for a unit that is called Recherche. We do the investigative stuff. And from the start of the pandemic, I have been working as a fact checker also. It's like just what Andrea said. What is it that we are doing at these two units? Basically, we are looking for black spots or blind spots. And once we find them, we're trying to shed a light. What is a black spot or a blind spot, if you will? It is basically a topic or topics overlooked, often overlooked and not paid attention to. It's sort of our guiding principles to just to identify these blind spots and then also the occurring problems that come from it. And then ask, is it a structural problem or is it just one person who has done a mistake, right? Look at, for example, minimum wages. I'm going to come to this example more and more often. If a worker in Germany is not paid his or her minimum wage, why is that happening? Is that because his or her boss is not paying attention? Or is it because the laws that we have in Germany are not sufficient? So where is the structural problem in this? I'm going to give you some examples of stories that me and my colleagues have done. I have just joined this unit very recently, but just to give you an overlook of the stories that have come out of this unit. We've been covering tax fraud, the Cum scheme, if you will, environmental destruction, hacking and cybercrime is a huge part of our reporting. We have a whole team of data journalists looking at this. Child abuse is a topic that my colleagues have covered. Also the fraud in car manufacturing, which is huge in Germany, looking at how many car manufacturers we have here. And then there's one part that we always work on. It's undocumented or exploited workers, domestic or from abroad. The question of how we work at Recherche, the investigative team, is, as I said, finding blind spots and black spots, identifying them, and then developing sort of a key phrase, sort of a working hypothesis, looking at, as I said, or as I mentioned in this example before, why is a person not paid its minimum wage? Is it structural? Is it individual? And what are the reasons behind it? So this is our starting point. Then we work in teams of at least two reporters and always two editors to ensure what we call Vier-Augen-Prinzip, which is to have four eyes looking at the evidence at every given moment. We are looking for witnesses, sources, and documents. Claims are not enough. So once again, the example, minimum wage, a worker turns to us and says, well, I'm not paid the money I'm supposed to receive for my work. And then we say, okay, let's have a look at the documents. Is it correct that the minimum wage, for example, is breached? And so we need evidence. We also have to break open archives. This was the case in a research we did on orphans that were shipped throughout Germany post World War II, for example. And sometimes, especially working with people who have been exposed to violence, it means breaking open memories, which is a tough and often psychologically hard to comprehend process, and it takes time and it also takes empathy. But this also is part of our work. It's not just looking at documents, it's also speaking to people and talking to them, giving them time to really breathe and go through what they've experienced. And one of our key aspects is never to pay a source. This has also to do with the independence that is important to us. We are given money, so we are independent and we never pay a source. I'm gonna just very quickly show you one example that might be of interest to you. It's a story that two of my colleagues did on daycare in 2018. The headline reads, Ambulante Intensivpflege, ein schwerkrankes Geschäft, which literally translates to a sick business, a very sick business. It sort of combines all of the stuff that I told you before. Germany is an aging society. People in need of daycare are often overlooked, so you have this blind spot. We have heard in the beginning of this research that we did of mistreatment of these people in need, often by untrained and underpaid workers, people who often come from Eastern Europe, who are lured into working as a medical personnel without being trained. So basically, this is really one of the stories that is the core of our work at Recherche. To get this story out, there had to be a rigorous fact check before actually publishing it. What do I mean with fact check? We have to look, especially when it's investigative stories, first of all, are the names right? Are the institutions right? Is everyone quoted? Did each and every side have the opinion to reply to our reporting? The more severe the accusation is, calling daycare ein schwerkrankes Geschäft, a severely sick business, is a high bar. So you have to stick to it and you have to have the evidence, which means documents, people, testimonies from people. And then we publish it. This story came out at Tagesschau and then also in other political magazines, in the television, in radio, online. So when we do a story, we are not sort of locked into one show, but we can use the entire network, which Andrea pointed out is huge, and then try to get this story to the people all over Germany. Sometimes we start the research and we say, okay, this is important, especially to people living in, for example, Cologne or in the north, somewhere in Niedersachsen. We do the main story, give it to our colleagues there, who then continue and film and sort of give aspects that are locally of importance to these people. But as I said, fact-checking, we do internally before the stories get out. So we talk to colleagues, editors, sometimes lawyers working within our company. But then also fact-checking are a field of journalistic work by itself. Facts, and you have to underline this when you start working as a journalist, facts are not opinions, facts are facts, right? So numbers are numbers, facts are not opinions. Since the start of the pandemic with the new coronavirus, we had false, misleading, emotional claims about where this virus came from, what it does, who it affects. So from basically February on, I think my colleagues and I, who work in a fact-checking unit, could have covered the false claims 24/7. We tried to cover a lot. I'm going to give you some examples, but it was the speed at which misinformation spread was, I think, just like it was parallel to the speed that the virus spread all over the world. We have been trying to publish stories that show that images are altered, that videos are taken out of context, that fakes, disinformation campaigns are spreading, especially online, like crazy. There's no other word to really put it. So what you see here is just like I think this is stories that I did within a week or something. We had to do tickers, like, you know, like when there's a football match and you write at every minute something new happens. At every minute during the pandemic, a new fake plopped up somewhere on the internet. So this is basically what we did. Try to also cover these stories because, especially here in Germany, you have people using different messaging services, social media, also a sort of blind spot, an overlooked counter society, if you will. And yes, when we fact check things, we go into these dark spots. I have an example for you that also concerns fact checking, that uses open source tools that might be of interest for you. It's about counting roughly how many people attend, for example, demonstrations. But I think we can talk about this a little later. We can, you know, just if you have questions, start now, and I'm going to quit my screen and I'll come back to it when we're there. But yeah, questions, whatever. Thank you.
Yeah, also to me, if you have questions, we are there.
First of all, thank you very much for both of your speeches. So does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Roth or Mr. Khamis?
I have a question perhaps to both. In the context here of our project week, for example, the war situation at the moment between Armenia and Azerbaijan. When you report about this conflict, how do you look at the facts? How do you see what is a fake, what is not a fake, and how is the information flow about such an international conflict to see it on the screen in Germany or in the radio? First question. The other one depends on it. At the moment, the Donbass war situation seems to be no theme of German or Western European medias. Where do you have a look at this conflict too at the moment?
What conflict again? The last, I didn't know.
The Donbass war.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe we have both very different views and structures to handle it, and that might make it very interesting, because I think Sammy can maybe tell how to deal with the subject Armenia, Azerbaijan in a structural way, which we do. And I can tell you, because we have also like people like me sitting in the departments, like I'm going very often abroad, and I research in a traditional way. I'm not part of a research unit, unfortunately. So, but if I had a subject 3 years ago. I had the subject to go to Azerbaijan and to make a film about the gas and oil deal. And so, as you might know, Azerbaijan as well as Armenia are both politically controlled. So they have both problems with democracy. They have both big influences from different countries. So if you're going to that country, you're totally lost, because they give you informations and you know it's a government information, and they try to keep you away from the hotspots where you can find other information. But this would not be only the case in Azerbaijan, this would also be the case in Armenia. So I'm talking about both. So if you do research like me and you're going abroad and are directly in the country, it's more than difficult to find the information, because you have to meet also people who criticize the government. You have to listen to them, look carefully what are their interests. So I met a lot of people. I met students, I met officers from governmental, how to say, it's from institutions which are critical to the government. Also, I met journalists, and we also asked before a colleague from the IRD who was very often in that country. But still, I always was lost in information. I was led to the wrong camps, which they called with people from Bergkarabakh, and in reality it was a governmental camp with very nice looking and so on. So you have to check. You have to check always, is this right, is this not wrong? You have to listen to the other side. So which is the basic work of us reporters. If we go abroad, we always get lost in different informations, and you never know if is this right, is this wrong. So you get a feeling, you get an experience to whom you talk and to whom you listen, and if this is wrong or right. And you meet a lot of journalists, because these are your buddies in the country. You figure them out before, and you meet them and say, what's up, where are the problems? So this is my way to deal with that. And maybe just before we go to the next point, we lead to Sammy, how he would handle it.
Well, first of all, I'm not, but you have been talking about this before in your course, that the ARD, for example, has a huge network of correspondents all over the world. So if a story comes into the German media, it basically runs through the correspondents who are spread all over the world. You cannot visit either Armenia or Azerbaijan at the moment, so our colleagues in Moscow are responsible. So these are our people there. They're working with the German broadcasting company, and they are either at the scene or it's in sort of their area they have to report. Videos from the ground, I think, is a topic that has sort of kept journalists busy, mainly since the start of the war in Syria, and maybe even a bit before. We have established certain fact-checking measures at the Tagesschau, for example, to identify if these videos are altered or not, if there's metadata given in the video. Also, for example, and I know this very well because I have had experience working in verifying videos from Syria back at the ARD office in Cairo, which was responsible by the time. And so basically you get a video and you see mayhem and you see destruction. You have to analyze this video, looking at where was it taken, when was it taken, and what does it actually show. You have to really break down each and every information that is layered in this video. Some of it is technical. You can look at the metadata, when was it recorded and where was it recorded. You can speak to the people who are on the ground. We did this in Syria, mainly citizen journalists, if you will. We told them, when you take a video, when there's an airstrike, first of all, film the daily newspaper or a watch or wherever, then go around so that we can sort of check, for example, on Google Maps or on satellite image, that you are filming from this very spot, and then sort of narrow in on what is happening. So show us more than what you think is important, so that we, when we sort of put it on the air, can say, this actually happened, or this actually took place. But what happened is still unclear. And we know, especially from Syria, that videos from there were not always safe and sound. They were given by parties to us, and this is basically what we say. When we do news, we very often say, look, this happened, side A says it is this, side B says it is this. This is how news is sort of produced when they are from abroad. And then you have experts, for example, sort of giving you a guide of how to read what happened. But our responsibility is to first and foremost show what happened without giving you a definite opinion and sort of nudge you in one place or the other. It's just showing, not telling you what to think.
Partly I disagree because there's really the difference between news and the background stories. I'm doing the background stories and I'm obliged to build up an opinion and also to say it in the film. But so it's only partly, I have to give an opinion, but not to say this is the truth. This is what I said in the beginning, because we have always the responsibility not to say this is the truth, this is not the truth, and you can't. In the disputes between countries, there is no truth. Nobody can tell if Azerbaijan or Armenia are right with Bergkarabakh. Who should own Bergkarabakh? Who should rule it? To whom does it belong? We have the same problem with Afghanistan or with Cyprus. Who can judge to where this part or region belongs? So we can't. But we have to build our opinion in that sense that we lead our spectators to build up an opinion, to say, listen, there's this and this situation and the people are poor. You let the people speak, you let them speak by themselves, but you say, okay, this is the problem. They don't have enough, they have very bad housing, for example. So to give the people who maybe are the victims a chance also to say, you know, these problems, the political problems, let us left alone somewhere in the field in Bergkarabakh with even no houses, living since years. How many years? It's intense, and we're left out. Nobody cares about us. We have no contacts to our families, and so on. This is maybe the way I try to focus on the problems. And if I give a statement about, for example, the oligarch government in Azerbaijan, I always try to balance this a little bit and just to giving the people the infos also from the other side and let them make up the opinion. But I must say I lead them a little bit through because I have to. In a 30 or 50 minutes film, you have to be more in the background. It's more than news. You have to, how to say, you know how films, you give opinions, but you don't tell them as the truth. There is not one truth. So.
Thank you very much.
No?
Sorry?
What's the second question?
One sentence, that's the difference between truth and fact.
Yeah. Yeah. There is not a truth, and this is people always want the truth. No? They love these newspapers where somebody is condemned or a whole government is condemned. It's more easy. So, but this is really the deepest responsibility of a public broadcast, not to do that.
Yeah. Maybe in addition to that, Mr. Khamis, you also mentioned that you're talking to individuals and maybe also, trying to investigate how, what are their memories, how do they think about it, and how many individuals are you then conducting interviews with for one story?
Dozens. It's often dozens, and it often takes a very long time. So to get our stories out. Like I'm researching a story now for 2 or 3 weeks. I can't tell you what it's about, but I think I've been speaking nonstop to at least 20 people to this point. And it's going to get more to get the story hard and also to get the documents. A colleague of mine is working on, as I said, these orphanage topics. And this is where one contact leads to another contact, leads to another contact. And you very often have, especially when there's these people are now in their 50s and 60s, they've been carrying this sort of wound within their souls for a very long time, and they are now willing to speak. And once they are willing to speak, they speak to other people who have been in the same situation. And so then it gets on and further and further and further. So you have to speak to more people. That will lead, if you're lucky, to people who have been in charge and who still have notes and documents. And yeah, this is how you then compile the story, get like a key phrase, as I said, sort of boil it down, and then look at, can you make it a film? Is it news? Is it a podcast or whatever? But it includes speaking to a lot of people.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mrs. Roth, you just mentioned also in your comment that would be nice if our participants share their stories. I don't know, Mr. Yeah, who could say something? Yeah, maybe Flodomir. I don't know. So yesterday, what we had, like what I mentioned in the beginning, yesterday evening, we talked about one of our organizers from Ukraine. He said, okay, for me, the German media system is perfect. Would be great if we could have implement such a system in Ukraine. And then we talked about how it is really a role model or not, because from the German perspective, it often, so for instance, Mr. Michael Klemm from the German, yeah, you know him.
I'm part of his team, so.
Oh, wonderful. So actually, I asked him the question on Monday. So I was asking him, so what are you criticizing about the system? Because it all sounds perfectly fine. And then he said, well, maybe, well, there could be maybe the problem that we don't talk much about, for instance, Africa or about other countries. So maybe this could be also an interesting topic for today. I mean, are we talking enough about Eastern European countries? I don't know, what do you think about that?
And also, in which way are we talking about Eastern European countries? Are we talking about them in the context of war and crisis or exploitation, or as we do in many African states, in impoverishment, famines, and so forth? Or are we showing day-to-day life? And this is, I think, when you ask, what do I criticize about the public broadcasting? I do criticize that it is looking at numbers too much. How many people view a show? What is the quota that we reach with our programs? Of course, this is important to sort of know where we are standing, but on the other hand, we do not rely on everybody watching us at any given moment. And I do see this in certain units, in certain programs, that especially people higher up the chain are sort of fixating on the numbers of viewers. And this leads to them thinking, okay, maybe we should do more stories on what the people are really interested in. And what they are really interested in is what happens in, like just in front of them, and not what is happening around the world. So basically, like with this criticism, I'm sort of like, I'm very outspoken here, but I see this as a problem, because then it boils down to, oh, what's happening in Donbass? Oh yeah, there's some fighting, let's report about it. But it should be going deeper than that, in my opinion.
I share your opinion totally, because I think it's a consequence also of our finances, which are shrinking, as I said already. And when they cancelled a lot of broadcasts in the ARD, which were specially made for foreign countries. So, for example, in my chain, Bavarian television, we have only one broadcast. It's a Weltspiegel, part of the ARD, which concentrates on foreign stories, and not only, like Sammy said, wars and ongoing problems, but also on everyday's life, or also positive examples, or if it's art or culture or people's living. So it's only one broadcast in a week remaining. So that's totally nothing. And I know how much we reach out just to pick up a small broadcasts from other chains and take them and send them again. And then they send ours, and then we send theirs. And sometimes the stories are really like 4 or 5 years old. And this is a big problem, I must say. And it's a consequence of our financial situation. So we concentrate mostly on Germany. And yes, if there is a war, we have it in the news. The news is specified for that, but there is no other background stories. And if you say Africa, that's so far away, we don't even report from anything over there. This is where I like Arte so much. I don't know if you like if you know the German-French program Arte. It's a smaller program, but they have a lot of correspondents in every country of the world, and the correspondents speak French, so for Arte it's perfect, and they directly report from a country, even if it's how to say, a beginning of a nice, interesting startup in a city, or an interesting family's life where somebody began to sing or something. So, but you have to see these everyday stories. We are longing for that, but we don't have the capacities and the financial background to do this.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinions. Yes, Mrs. Roth, you asked maybe for other stories from other countries. I'm not sure if you want to say something, but Mr. Vladimir Daniluk, maybe you're interested in sharing how you work in Ukraine. He's an honorary journalist in Ukraine.
У меня краткий вопрос к двум спикерам. Мы живем в регионе Украины, который возле границы с Польшей и Белоруссией. Вот сегодня...
Switch the interpretation button on the right corner.
Where?
There's an interpretation button on the right corner on Zoom, so you can switch to English.
Thanks. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Daniluk, please go ahead.
Я живу в регионе Украины, который...
I live in a region of Ukraine that borders Poland and Belarus, and today President of Ukraine, Zelensky, visited our region. There was an interesting know-how that none of the media were accredited for the visit, except for a narrow circle of people who came from Kiev together with the president. So my question is to the German colleagues: is it possible in Germany, so that, for instance, Merkel comes to Munich or Steinmeier comes to Hanover, and none of the local media are allowed to cover the visit? And what would your advice be for us in this situation?
Can I ask a question first? Did they give you a reason?
Да, я задал.
Do they give you a reason why you were not allowed to visit? Is it because of Corona, or was it specified why you were not allowed to attend the meeting?
Нет, просто сказано, что...
No, they just said that Presidential Press Service decided not to give accreditation to local mass media. That's it.
That's bad. Are you working for a newspaper?
Да. Но это не только меня.
Yes, but it was not only about me. It was about all local media.
I remember one precedent, this was also not in Germany, where a newspaper just printed blank pages and left out. It said you could read about what the president said when he visited our region, but you can't read it. And then it was a white piece of paper. And it was very impressive. And it showed the public that the president or whoever was in charge at the time did not want to ask the questions. Or you can print, well, this is, well, I don't know how easy your newspaper is. Print the questions, leave out the answers, and then also have blank spaces and say, we wanted to know from the president what he does to our region. Question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the answers are blank because we couldn't attend the press conference. We were basically cut out from it.
Also, there's the big European Union supporting you, so you can pose your problem to us, and we make pressure. We will write an article about it, and it will be online and in all Facebook and everything. And sometimes we also write letters to the presidents. Was very often the case now in case of Corona help, which didn't come, but also if the press freedom is heard in any way. So you should make pressure to the government also on that way, going through the European Journalist Federation, which is your roof if you have problems in your country. And I would say if it begins like that, it ends up on a heavy base, government controlling you, and it will lead to next stories which you can't make. And so you should go also the big way. And you can, yeah, Lena can give you my address. We can make it very short. You write down your problem, maybe in English, and I will lead it to our department, and we will write to your government.
Yes, I will send you the email addresses. I will connect you both. Okay.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was very intense debate, I feel, and I would love to continue it if anyone else feels like sharing maybe their perspective, their questions. I think this is a unique opportunity to talk to Mrs. Roth and Mr. Khamis.
I would say something if no one else wants. Yes, first I want to thank you for bringing up the point of in which context is reported about other countries in German media. For example, I think many people in Germany don't know anything about Ukraine or Armenia, but that there's war. Yeah, that's problematic, I think. But my question was about the health, migrant workers and healthcare, because you, Mr. Khamis, you brought up the example, and you, Mrs. Roth, you also talked about the balance of your media coverage, and there are many of these really great reports about bad working conditions in Germany. But often they're not really in good placing, like 8 o'clock in the evening news. And they're rather topics that politicians brought up. So maybe you can tell us more about the balancing of topics that politicians came up with and other topics that are not really in the debate, but are very important, like bad working conditions and so on.
It's a constant struggle to get the slots that we want for our stories. That has to do because we value our stories as our stories and think that they are worth being broadcasted to the biggest possible set of viewers or listeners or whatever. But it's tough. It's especially tough when, or I can give you an example when it worked pretty well. Beginning of, no, it was, I think, December, a huge data breach was uncovered by my colleagues, and it concerned the data of patients, like I think in the millions, their files were openly on the internet. And we thought, okay, this is a story. You can access these data of, I think, a couple of million Germans and also Americans. And we published it, and within a day, this story grew huge. We covered it all day long. It was in the news circle. The ministers answered, and it was just a very rapid, if you will, rapidly developing story. But you can't always guarantee this. It's also beyond planning. So when we try to get as many viewers as possible, it's great. But if a story takes on a life of its own, it's even better, and everyone talks about it. But I can just tell you, it's a struggle. We're trying whatever we can to persuade editors to put it on good timing. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's not that we have, for example, like the CNN or BBC, a 24-hour news station, but it's not as prominent as CNN or BBC. So it is not perfect, but we don't live in a perfect world. So yeah.
I think that's why we built up a research unit with you, Sammy, because because we need new topics also, and there's a tendency to focus a little bit, COVID-19 pandemic. So we focus in every broadcast on the pandemic, and people say, oh, what again happened now with Greece, the financial help? We never heard about it again. And sometimes to make a joke, I say we should make a broadcast only on the ongoing conflicts which are not reported anymore, because there's really a lot. Also with Syria, we don't know what happens in the moment, because it's only COVID-19. So that's really a problem, and we make a lot out of it. We report about the situations in the hospitals and so on. It's perfect, but sometimes I really miss the other reporting, and I think it's a very good work of Sammy and his colleagues that they say, listen, there are also other topics, and go to the departments, because the departments always say, no, the audience wants this now, or wants this and nothing other. And the other problem is with the countries far away. Just to dock on that, because you said Africa. If we, for example, make a suggestion, say we should make something in Africa, say that's far away, nobody wants to see this. It's so, and what exactly maybe okay, if a prominent German is going there, you can make a film out of it, but only if a German is there. So, and we have always this struggle. I think Sammy and me, we are more of the people who say we should concentrate also on other subjects, but it's hard to go through, because we have a direction, we have that financial crisis, we say no risk, and so it's a permanent struggling. And it's mainly really the work of Sammy and his department to try to always every day give us new topics and say, hey, you could also do that. But maybe Sammy, you forgot to say how you research on new topics. Maybe this could be a very good last word, because to find new topics, because if every topic is made, sometimes in the news and the background stories, you think, what could I do else? I don't find anything else. And when we address Sammy.
Well, I'm going to just run through it very quickly. I think finding new stories, there's a couple of things. Once you have sources, they might come to you. Once you report a story, often a follow-up story sort of comes with it. You speak to someone and they mention just in a small sentence saying, oh, yeah, and there's this and that. And you go like, wait a second, can you rewind that? Are you saying that this company is actually doing this to you? Do you know that this is not legal or whatever? and then you come up with new stories. Also, I think it's just helpful to speak to, for example, when you speak to friends and you sort of, you just speak casually, and then they go like, well, that's interesting. And they ask a question, just like, or with your family or anything. They go like, this is very interesting, go deeper. And this should be sort of a sign to you to actually see that there is interest in this topic. Then, of course, very often, as we've heard from Ukraine, it is when there is set dates for certain people to show up, go there, ask a question. There's one guy in Germany who's attended the Bundespressekonferenz, which is the press conference of the federal government. When I speak to colleagues who work in Berlin, they go, this has been boring for decades. No one goes there. It's always the same people, blah, blah, blah. He went and made a YouTube channel of it, and he just asked questions. This is really, like, this became huge, and now we are live streaming these press conferences. You have to make them interesting. Then also, once you have your story, try to speak as much as you can with colleagues, unless it's confidential, to sort of get new angles, get new ideas of where you can go. We in our team work very openly, because very often a colleague like when I sort of propose a story, they go like, you need to speak to this person, you need to speak to that person. Now, since there's Corona, but also before, I think the most important tool a journalist has is a telephone. Call people, don't write emails, call people, and they will actually interact with you and sort of help you. So like this would be sort of a talk on its own, like how to speak, how to come up with new stories. I would like, maybe because I think it might be of interest for you, as I've touched upon before, just like very briefly show you one story that we did that also, I don't know, just like mysteriously became bigger than it was supposed to be. I'm going to share my screen real quick with you again. There are in Germany at the moment people who are against the Corona laws and how do you say, standards that are implied, limiting your movement, also shutting down schools. You have this in your countries as well, there's no need to really say it, but there's people who demonstrate against it in Germany and have been demonstrating against it for quite a while. One of the first really big demonstrations took place in Berlin on August 1st. And basically from the beginning, there was a discussion about how many people attended this rally. There were 2 or 3 numbers circulating. The first number was the police said there were around 17 to 20,000 people attending. The people who held the rally said it was 800,000 to 1.5 million, or 1.3 million people. And somehow it was a huge discussion. And you can ask, why bother? Like, who cares? There was a demonstration, it's over now. Egal, as we say in Germany, Belesh in Arabic. So it doesn't matter, who cares? We have to bother, because the size of a demonstration is actually an indication of how legitimate and how broad this protest is. It's like this in a country like Germany, but it's also the same in countries with more restrictive and authoritarian regimes. In Germany, we say, or there is always like a rough calculation, for each person who goes, you'll find 10 who didn't go, because there's still a high bar for people to demonstrate. It's of course different when you demonstrate in Ukraine, in Belarus, in Syria, of course. But what I'm going to show you is just how we sort of narrowed down the number of people who attended. You can see on the bottom, there's a picture taken from Siegessäule, which is a column in the middle of Berlin. And it was a photo taken in the direction eastwards towards Brandenburger Tor, which is also a landmark. So you have landmarks. This is important for sort of figuring out how many people there are. Can you guess roughly how many like, do you see it clearly? Can you like make a guess?
Yeah.
You can type it in the how do you say, in this message.
Into the chat. Yeah, you can
type. Yeah, you can type it in the chat. And while you're typing, I'm going to show you what we did. We went to Google Maps, and also, as I said, there is these landmarks. On the very right, you have Denkmal für die Opfer der Mauer, and this is the space I marked, because why? I was looking for these two landmarks. There is a breakthrough in this road. To just sort of give you a hint, there's this stage, and then you see Brandenburger Tor in the back, and then on the right and on the left, we sort of highlighted landmarks in the road, which you can find when you look at the satellite image here and then there also. The tool I used is called mapchecking.org. It has satellite images from Google, so it's worldwide, and you can look at, you can sort of see what the space is that a certain demonstration has covered, for example. Then you need to know what is the density of the people attending, right? You can see some are standing closer, some are standing more loosely. For this, you can see this on the right. I looked at other images, I looked at video, and I looked at live streams from the event. To sort of, just because we're just narrowing down the number, I just needed a rough how do you say, a rough overview of how many people are standing next to each other. And then I went to some legal documents of how many people are actually allowed to stand in front of a stage, because there is limitations that come with, for example, the fire department. There's not more than 2 people a square meter are allowed, unless, and then the police has to get in. So Germany, like a lot of laws for a lot of things, also in the size of people who attend. So we said, and then you can also check, for example, with your, this is what I did. I called the local subway operator and asked them, how close can people stand in a bus, or how close can they stand in the subway? And they said, if there's more than 4 people per square meter, you're sort of standing like this, like sardines in a can, right? And then I wrote this down and said, okay, if I look at this, a person sitting takes up a square meter, 2 people per square meter are really dense, 4 people, 6 people is sort of, you can't move anymore and you're scrammed tight together. And then you go back to this tool and you get the square meters and you just add it up. And the result is, in this very story, that the number the police said, around 20 to 30,000, was more accurate than what the people who held the demonstration actually said. So if you go to mapchecking.org, you can find a place that you have in Belarus, wherever. You can square it down, and then narrow it down. Try to get as many information as you can, and then add it up. It's not rocket science, it's very simple. And it also gives you a hint of how big a demonstration is, how many people dare to attend in certain parts of the world, and how legitimate their claims are. Because in Germany, they say, we speak for the silent majority. If you got, well, you didn't turn up with 1,300,000, you just came with 20,000, which is still, it's still people demonstrating it, but it's not the majority of the people. So this is just one example that I wanted to give to you, to see that with very, very limited and very, very simple tools, you can fact check and what there is. And then also, what we do is we always give the sources. In the text, you can see what is map checking, what is the fire department and the subway operator advising people of how close to stand. Of course, this is with Corona different. But then also what we do when we do fact checks, I don't know if you do this in your countries, we also look at a wider narrative of disinformation. So this would be also a very new topic, but if you talk about fake news and disinformation, you can see that they're always embedded in an ideological frame, if you will. So, for example, many people who spread fake news are using different narratives of how to discredit people or organizations. And you have to know this to write your story. If this is just a new aspect of what they do to get their narrative through, you have to name it also in the fact check. But this is, I think this was sort of out of context, but this is, I just wanted to share it with you because I think map checking is something that you can use on an...
Yes. No, I think it's not out of context at all. And also if you would like to maybe share the website you just mentioned with us.
I'm gonna type it into, I'm gonna go back and
I'm also like copying everything and writing it to, like we're having like a daily email to everyone. So I'm going to send you information also from you, Mrs. Roth, forward.
Yeah, I found the Ukrainian colleague, so he can directly write him. Maybe the Russian translator can give him the contact.
Yes, this is wonderful for Mr. Daniluk and all the other also young journalists being here with us. So thank you very much, Mrs. Roth, Mr. Khamis, for being here, for taking the time. I feel like this was an enriching discussion. Thank you for maybe showing us tools how to analyze and do fact checking. So thank you very much.